Hello! So, we are back to me choosing from my regions jar, but I did just want to say that I filmed this while I have COVID, which is why I have a burst blood vessel in my eye. I feel like I had to mention it so you don't go, oh my god, what's wrong with your eye? Or, oh my god, your eye still looks terrible. It's the middle of December, and I have COVID and a burst blood vessel. So, let's pick a region. For the first regions jar, now I've mentioned before that I might do this every month this year. I still can't say for certain, but let me know in the comments what you think. Should I pick a different region every single month? Right, this is the one, we're going with it. Central Africa. So the first one I did was an African region. The first one I did was Southern Africa, so I've done an African region before. In fact, the only continent, well, I haven't done North America and I haven't done Europe yet, but Central Africa is what we're going for. Okay, my friend, oh, it's got really dark with the sun, but my friend just brought back my laptop, so I can tell you that Central African countries that I'm reading from, will be reading from, is Angola, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Chad, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Sao Tome and Principe. I will let you know in the actual TBR and you'll know which countries I'm talking about there. So I'll send you back to Regime from the future who has more of a clue what's going on than COVID Regime from the past.
Hello, so it's quite a bit later than when I drew out my region for this month now, and as you can see I am not at home. I am in Dorset this weekend, so that is where we are beginning this vlog. So as you saw in my last clip, I am reading books from Central Africa this month. The spreadsheet where I have all the books I found will be linked in the description, but there weren't as many as I had hoped. Well, there were quite a lot, but I didn't want to read from Alain Mambanko because I read a book from him last year, so I'm trying to read from different authors. And a lot of the countries didn't have that many. Like, I couldn't find a single book from Chad, I don't think. But the books I'm starting with A General Theory of Oblivion by Jose Eduardo Agualusa. I'm not that familiar with Portuguese, so I apologise if that pronunciation is wrong, but Agualusa is a Brazilian Angolan writer, and this book is about Luda, who moved to Angola from Portugal because her sister married an Angolan man, and they moved just before Angolan independence. And on the eve of Angolan independence, when her sister and brother-in-law have gone missing, she bricks herself into her apartment so no one can get through into the apartment to get to her. She's just in there by herself, where she will remain for the next 30 years. She lives off vegetables and pigeons, burns her furniture and books to stay alive, and keeps herself busy by writing her story on the walls of her home. So at the beginning there is an introduction that says, I was privileged enough to meet Luda and to read her diaries. So it's been framed as a fictionalised version of a true story, but I think that it is just fiction. And it was also shortlisted for the Man Booker International Prize in 2016 and won the English Pen Awards. So far, very readable, very easy and light, but also very fast-paced. But I think that that pace is going to instantly slow down because now she is, for 30 years, locked in a house by herself. So then I am also reading By Night the Mountains Burn, which also won the English Pen Award, and this one is published by And Other Stories, which I'm pretty sure only really publish translated works, and this is by Juan, Tomas, Avila, Laurel, and translated by Jethro Sutar. And this is a book from a writer from Equatorial Guinea, and it is kind of based on what his life was like growing up on this tiny island off the coast of Equatorial Guinea, and what happened when people turned up who were not from there, living with his mysterious grandfather, several mothers and no fathers. We learn of a dark chapter in the island's history. A bushfire destroys the crops, then hundreds perish in a cholera outbreak. Superstition dominates, and the islanders must sacrifice their possessions to the enraged ocean god. And I will say, I have started this one, and the writing does remind me of Garcia Marquez. In fact, so does this one. They have a similar tone to them where everything's a bit strange and wry and off-kilter. I guess bricking yourself into an apartment is kind of thing that would happen in a Garcia Marquez novel. Perspective of someone telling the story of their childhood. So a lot of the perspective is very childlike, and we don't know, he doesn't know very much, so we have to try and infer from what he's telling us what is actually going on. And I'll be back soon to tell you a bit more, but I'm going to take you out on a walk with us today as well. Hello! So it's a bit later now. We went on a walk to Durdle Door today in Dorset, which is where I am. It was a bit of a harder walk than we thought it was going to be, but it was a lovely view at the end. So we also went into Swange, and I did go to the bookshop and I did buy some books. So I have bought The Burning Chamber by Kate Moss. I bought this because my mum for Christmas got me a workshop with Kate Moss and Maggie O'Farrell. 19-year-old Minou Joubert, who receives an anonymous letter at her father's bookshop sealed with the distinctive family crest, contains just 5 words: "She knows that you live." And this is in Carcassonne in 1562. Carcassonne, sorry, in 1562. And then, you know, I'm trying to read 30 classics before I'm 30, so I bought Taib Saleh, Seasons of Migration to the North, which is from 1966, and this is about a young man who returns to the village in Sudan after many years studying in Europe. He finds that among the familiar faces there is now a new stranger, the enigmatic Mustafa Saeed. And the two becomes friends. Mustafa tells the young man the disturbing story of his own life in London after the First World War. Most famous writers in the 20th century in Arabic. He's from Sudan, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to read this one. It's also really short, which is part of the reason I was drawn to this one over some other classics. But in terms of reading books from Central Africa, halfway through At Night the Mountain Burns. So far, I'm enjoying the language. It's interesting the way that it's told. It seems like it's told like someone telling you a story. So there are references about you all listening to his story. Also kind of an unreliable or a very not omniscient narrator. Like, our narrator doesn't know things, and he often says, I don't know exactly what happened, I don't know if this actually happened or it was just what we were told. So the story is kind of unfolding with a lot of mysteries. So far it is intriguing, and yeah, I'm enjoying the writing. It's not exactly my perfect style of writing, but I do think it is working well. It's like a story of this island, so there aren't a huge amount of characters to like connect with or know or understand. There's the mysterious grandfather, the boy telling you the story, and then everyone else is just boys, girls, men, women. There's not like huge detail or description about who they are. So it's much more about like the culture of this island and how things are in this island, and then also the terrible things that are happening on this island, rather than a story about characters. Another of the books that I am reading is How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo Mbue, who is a Cameroonian American author. And this is set in an unnamed African country, so it could be any African country, really. From Cameroon, I assume that it's based fairly much on the experiences of Cameroon. It's been told from two different perspectives so far, one that is a collective we of the children of the town, and one that is a girl who's a specific child of the town, and it's telling the story of an oil company that has destroyed the environment around the town, the drinking water, giving a lot of people illnesses, but claimed not to and not to know anything about what's going on, and that everything's safe, and this is an American oil company. And it's about that kind of neo-colonialism and extractivism. And the country's government is led by a brazen dictator who is in the pocket of this American oil company. And so something happens in this community, they strive to like fight back against both the government and the oil company. So I've just begun that one, but I will tell you more about it when I have read a little more. And tomorrow we are leaving Dorset, so that will be the last of the walks that you will see from me. I will be back at home and back at work from the day after tomorrow. I'm off work today because I have second day of a killer migraine, but just got a parcel that had been delivered to my next door neighbour, which feels like books, so I'm going to open it on camera, even though I feel quite nauseous and sore. Yes. So I didn't realise how big it was, but still, this is a book that I talked about being super excited for in my anticipated release video. This is The Gift by Liz Hayder. So this is Liz Hayder, sorry, and it's published on the 17th of February by Manila Press. In 1840 October, a young woman staggers alone through a forest in Shropshire as a huge pair of impossible wings rip themselves from her shoulders. Meanwhile, when rumours of a fallen angel cause a frenzy across London, a surgeon desperate for fame and fortune finds himself in the grip of a dangerous obsession, one that will place the woman he seeks in terrible danger. For anyone who loved The Essex Serpent, which I did love, and I think it was also compared to The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock, which I also love. So yeah, excited for this one. It's enormous, but the writing is big too, so it shouldn't actually take too long to read. I haven't read much more because of the horrendous migraine I've had for the past 2 days, so I will get back to you when I have read some. Hello. So it's the next morning, but I do still have a migraine or a migraine hangover post-drome. Not really sure which one it is, but I'm just feeling a bit... Fatigue is heavy today. I feel like someone's hit me with a brick. So I'm doing my best, but my best is not my best. I finished At Night the Mountain Burns, and it's an interesting book. It's a very cyclical book, like it kept coming back round on itself. There was a lot of repetition and events of the book. Like he would tell you about an event and then he would tell you about the future event, but then he would go back and actually that future event had happened before the first event he told you about, and it just kept going round and round, and there was a lot of repetition throughout the sentences. So sometimes if I'd put the book down and then I'd come back to it, I'd be like, wait, have I already read this? But it's just the way that the prose was structured. It was very cyclical in nature. There was a lot of it coming back to itself, which was a little difficult to get my head around, but I did kind of get the timeline. It's not a book where very much happens. It's really not a book about plot or a book about character, really. So if either of those things are what you're interested in, it doesn't really work on either level. None of the characters particularly have any depth. It's more a book about the island and a book about the people of the island and the behaviours of the island. So it's kind of looking at what it was like growing up there, and the poverty and the colonialism and the dependence on outside things, and the culture, the relationship of Catholicism to the more like spiritual, or what's the word I want, superstitious beliefs of the people who live there. Yeah, there's a lot of tragic things that happen, like a cholera epidemic and the public lynching of a woman, and yeah, there's a lot of violence in it, but it's all told from the perspective of a child. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I don't really know. The writing style itself wasn't my favourite, but I did feel like it was an interesting book because it was not about plot or character, which is so unusual from what I normally read. Yeah, I think it's one that I'm going to have to ruminate on before I can give you a full review. The other book I am halfway through now is How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo and Mbue. Mbue grew up in a town that was very much like a petro town, where the wealth came from oil, but it was very unequally distributed, and so that's kind of what this book is about. The corrupt government, the corrupt American oil company. The writing style itself doesn't really speak to me. We're getting told things from a lot of different perspectives, and I like that. I think that the character development is really well done, and we're seeing how, like, there are no black and white characters, everything's very morally grey, and we can see how people end up in situations that they end up in. Like, fears and the beliefs of the characters are all well done, but the writing itself feels a little monotonous, not grounded in setting, so it's very much about the characters, and I think possibly it's because this setting isn't real. It's a fictional town. That's why the setting doesn't feel as grounded as it could. So I think last time I was filming this, my camera died. I think it was in the middle of telling you about How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo and Mbue, which I haven't read any more of since then. But yeah, so far the writing style is not my favourite, but the characters are well developed and I'm enjoying this story. It's a very clear allegory, it's very clear what it's talking about. I will get back to reading that one and let you know when I finish it. I have now finished A General Theory of Oblivion by Jose Eduardo Agualusa. This one is really interesting. I think I put it down and I didn't read it for a couple of days, and then I picked it up again, and I shouldn't have done that because it took me, I forgot who everyone was. Which was my own fault for the way that I've read it, because I really loved the writing style. Like, it was quite bizarre, like kind of gave me Gabriel Garcia Marquez vibes. Kind of, there's like a tap dancing hippopotamus and someone who bricks themselves into a apartment, and it's very bizarre and weird, and I think that it's using that to talk about the strangeness of Angola under the authoritarian government. It's kind of funny in this really bizarre, dark humour way that I have discovered I really like Jon Kalman Stephenson, Marquez, like I said, this bizarre humour. I think Ben Galgut as well has kind of bizarre humour, particularly when it's talking about capitalism and colonialism, to sort of point out the absurdities of the system. I think that those are really well done. It's, again, not... There's someone coming down the thing and they can see me. A man who's putting something through our post box just stared at me while he was coming down, so that was awkward. It's not a very character focused book. All of the characters are kind of archetypes, stereotypes, just put in there to represent a particular point or for the purpose of making a point, but I don't mind that. I think it was well done. The writing itself was really lovely, beautiful, and as I said, weird and bizarre. Yeah, I think this one so far has been my favourite. The light detachment and readability combined with sharp insights, yeah, that definitely kind of sums up what I was trying to say. It's very readable but bizarre at the same time, and I like that tone a lot. So I'm glad I read this one. I can understand why it was shortlisted for the International Man Booker. So I also have read La Bastarda by Trifonia, Melibea, Obono, which is, I read as an audiobook on Scribd and was translated from the Spanish by Lawrence Schimmel, and has an afterword by Abusa de George or Jorge. It's a very short book, modern, the first work by an Equatorial Guinean woman to be translated into English, and it was only 88 pages long, so I thought I might as well just read it rather than coming on to you here and talking to you about it first. So it was about this girl. Uncle has been shunned from the village because he's what they call a man-woman, meaning he's gay, he sleeps with men, and she doesn't know who her father is. That's why she's called La Bastarda. Her mum is dead, and she is trying to find her father, but also her uncle is the only person she really relates to, and he's been shunned from the village, but they were also trying to get him to impregnate his sister-in-law, because her husband, his brother, is sterile, and she ends up getting involved with these indecent women, the Indecency Club, which is these three girls who are involved sexually, and she gets involved in that and then ends up in a relationship, and that's it. That's the whole story. I like the afterward better than I like the actual book. Like, it's very speedy. None of the characters are developed at all. Everything happens. There's a lot of plot that just happens in quick succession. And the writing is incredibly basic, and kind of awkward and clunky and uncomfortable, in terms of the style of writing, not in terms of the subject matter. It was an interesting subject matter, this sort of an LGBTQ, a queer book from Africa, looking at queerness in Africa and the reaction to it, and like, that's the most important thing. You need to be reproducing, and that element of it, reproduction, was definitely a part of the novel as well. There are terrible things that happen in it, like corrective rape and incest and all this, but yeah, it just doesn't feel like a novel or a novella. It doesn't feel like it's written It just feels like someone wanted to talk about these things, but had not got any skill with writing. And I don't know if that's because it's the translation. There was just nothing in the writing, like not even a slight hint of style or attempt at characterization. Wish I hadn't read that. I nearly DNF'd it, and then I was reading all these reviews and they were like, oh, it's great, it's really interesting, it's really good. I was like, am I missing something? So I read the whole thing just because it was so short, and it just wasn't really worth it. I've also begun Cruel City by Mongo Beti, and this is from 1955. It's a classic by a Cameroonian author, Mongo Beti, and this was translated by Pim Higginson. Has an introduction by Pim as well, and as well as having the novel Cruel City, it also has an academic essay Mongo Beti wrote called Romancing Africa, about writing from Africa in the 1950s, and the perspectives, specifically talking about Francophone Africa, and books written by Francophone African writers. It's a very short essay. It doesn't really go in depth into the idea, but it talks about how the only way that like French readers at the time, there wasn't an African reading population as such. There wasn't really a publishing industry in Francophone Africa, so there wasn't Africans reading at the time, and he was like, there is courage in writing books for Africans of the future to read, but you're not going to get read by Africans now. So what you're writing for a French audience, and 1955 is kind of the fall of the colonies for France, and so what the French reader wants is either this folkloric Africa, which is not real to Africa, or an Africa that where the colonizers were great, that really whitewashes what the colonizers did, and that was an interesting essay, although I do wish it had been a bit longer and a bit more in depth. And then Cruel City itself, although the introduction described it as an immature book and like not his best writing, but it was the only one I could actually read. But it's set in French colonial Africa in the mid-20th century. It is the coming of age story of a man. It tells the story of a young man's attempt to cope with capitalism and rapid urbanization of his country. Banda, the protagonist, sets off to sell the year's cocoa harvest to earn the bride price for the woman he has chosen to wed. Due to a series of misfortunes, Banda loses both his crop and his bride-to-be. Making his way to the city, Banda is a witness to a changing Africa, and as he progresses, the novel mirrors these changes in its style and language. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to read that one, and I'm going to finish How Beautiful We Were, both Cameroonian authors, and then possibly wrap this up. We'll see. Hello, I know I look quite rough, not feeling particularly well, but I am here to wrap up my Central African reading vlog. I DNF'd Cruel City by Mongo Beti. So when I last talked to you, I think I'd read the essay that was included in the introduction, and I hadn't started the actual novella. I got about 100 pages into the 200-page novella, and I just found myself struggling to keep reading, and I really wanted to finish it, because I feel like it's hard for me to give a proper analysis of a book that I haven't finished, and I think this is the first time in a Reading the Regions Read Around the World video that I haven't read more than 4 books, and it's because I couldn't finish this one, and so I feel like I'm not giving this area of the world as good a chance. And I feel a bit guilty for that. I don't know, I'm feeling a bit burnt out from reading, and a bit overwhelmed from reading as well, and filming and getting ahead of everything. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, and I think that probably contributed to not being able to push through just 100 pages of this book. But in terms of why I didn't, the writing was a little inconsistent. I felt at times it worked really well, really setting the scene. At other times it felt a little clunky. It also wasn't really very character focused, and I've mentioned before how I have trouble sometimes with sort of early mid-century classics. The way that they're written just doesn't seem to jive with me, and I think that that's possibly true of Cruel City as well. It very much in this one character's head, and all the other characters, everything seemed to happen really coincidentally, and all of the other characters were just, we were only seeing from his perspective, so they weren't developed people. While I can appreciate that sometimes, I don't really think that it worked here. It's hard for me to give a proper analysis when I've only read half the book, but also I'm trying not to keep struggling through books I don't like at the moment. So we'll see if I keep that up, but because I feel this kind of guilt about not having finished it because of the project more than because of the book. If nobody was going to know that I'd DNF'd it, I probably would feel less conflicted. That's the way I want. I'd probably feel less conflicted about it. I also finished How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo and Mbue. I enjoyed this, but I didn't love it. Again, it's sort of a medium book for me. I feel like it was an interesting experiment. I liked the way that the characters themselves weren't particularly important, and that doesn't mean that they were underdeveloped. They just, the way that they were written was to play a certain role. All of the characters were fulfilling a role in this sort of petro-state, petro-colonialism place, and they weren't drama, and they weren't individuals as such. They were representations of that role in this drama. And so whilst I liked how the writing style, I thought that that was good, and the drama itself, the way that it played out the sort of inevitability, but the sort of hope at the same time. Like, you hoped things would go differently, but there was a sense of inevitability, that sense of doom that kind of pervaded, and I enjoyed that, but it did mean that the characters were less important. And whilst, like I said, that was true also of a general theory of Oblivion, I preferred the writing style of that. I thought the writing here was a little more simplistic, and it didn't have the humour that one had. So whilst I thought it was accomplished, and it wasn't badly written, it just wasn't my preference in terms of the style of writing. A good example of this style of book, it felt very much like a drama, so there was plot that was pulling us along, but it was based in interpersonal and humanity. It was a very human book, but I didn't fall in love with it either. I just liked it. In the end, I've read 4 books, and this. I also started reading Johnny Mad Dog by Emmanuel Dongala, who's from the Republic of the Congo. I have read from the Republic of the Congo before, because I've read The Death of Comrade President by Alain Mabankou, but I started to read this one, and this one was about a like band of child soldiers during a war in Republic of the Congo, and like, of course it's brutal. That's a very brutal subject, and I couldn't handle it. The writing style was fine, kind of stripped back and bare, but from the perspective of a child, understandable, but it was too, like, you were straight in with the violence, and a lot of violence, and I couldn't handle it, so I only got through about 20% of that book and then decided that I couldn't manage it, so I don't really count it as a DNF more. But yeah, that is the end of reading from Central Africa. This is my first read around the world for 2022, and probably my least successful, in terms of the fact that I didn't manage to read as many books. There was a lot more focus on conflict in these books than, for example, Southern Africa. This was a very conflict heavy focus, and I think that I would like to read some non-fiction, particularly about Angola. If you have any non-fiction recommendations about Angola, please let me know in the comments down below, or any of these other countries. But Angola was, because A General Theory of Oblivion was my favourite out of all of these books. I'm particularly interested in Angolan history, and I probably will pick up Jose Eduardo Agualusa again if I have access to any of his works. This was the only one I could get at the moment, but maybe I will end up buying one of his other books. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this. I would love to hear your feedback, and I will of course keep going. Next month I'm reading books from Northern Europe, so there's a lot more to choose from Northern Europe, unsurprisingly, but that is what will be up at the end of February. Thank you for watching. As I said, please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and to subscribe. I put out new videos every Thursday and Sunday, so I will see you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye!